This is a production of the Gold Arrow Podcast Network. Hello and welcome to the Gold Arrow Camp Podcast, a podcast for friends of Gold Arrow Camp. Throughout the year, we'll be joining you to bring your day some of what makes Gold Arrow special. Our goal is to help you have fun, make friends, and grow throughout the year, not just when you're at GAC. Since we can't get together in real life, we gather here, around the virtual campfire. We have some of your favorite parts of morning assembly, like Joke of the Day. We also have interviews with experienced campers and some of your favorite counselors. We think it's a lot of fun, and we're glad you've joined us. This is episode 26, where we're joined by a longtime friend of the POG, a guy who was a camper and then a JC, and he's now a counselor. He's the man from Uncle. Wait, a man called Uncle. So today on episode 26, I was thrilled to have the opportunity to chat with Uncle. Uncle came to camp for a lot of years as a camper and then as a JC. He's notorious for his lip balm reviews. Now he's on our staff, and he had really good insights about how camp helps you make friends and what benefit that is when you move around or when you go off to a new school. He also had what I thought was really good advice for new campers about fear. He thinks it's important for us to admit when we're scared and that we should understand that we're not alone in that fear. My fear is that you always just skip the part of the pod that's coming up next, which is where I play guitar. Welcome to the podcast. It's Uncle. Uncle, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Soy, how are you?
I'm phenomenal now that we're chatting. I'm excited for it. So this is alarming to me, but not everybody who listens to the podcast knows who you are. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, how long you've been at camp, that whole story?
So I grew up in Southern California in Orange County. And I went to camp for 6 years as a camper. But in 7th grade, I moved to Singapore, lived there for 3 years with my sister, Coco, who's also another counselor. And then after we lived in Singapore for 3 years, we moved to Toronto. And I went there. And now I'm finally here in Athens, Georgia, going to University of Georgia for college. And I was a counselor last summer for my first year. I was a photographer. And I'm coming back this summer, ready to go again.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't realize you lived in Singapore. I knew you lived in Toronto. I like Singapore a lot.
Oh, yeah. It was amazing. It was a really cool experience. We got to travel pretty much everywhere in Asia.
Yeah.
If you name a country, we've probably been there. And it was just a great experience being able to see all that and experience something a lot different than the little bubble that we lived in Southern California.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of, especially as a home base. Yeah, because you can go pretty much everywhere. It's so centrally located.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
People who maybe weren't at camp the summer you were a junior counselor might not understand this. So can you explain to us how it is you became so kind of ingrained with Gold Arrow Camp lip balms?
Yeah, so I'm really not exactly sure how it started, but I know that was the first year that GAC had like the custom flavors.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that pretty much took over. Everybody loved, chipmunk cherry and I think Valhalla watermelon, stuff like that. And I think it was me and Raptor, another one of the things. We started like eating the chapstick and like licking the chapstick because it tasted so good. And then one day Lumos just told me to like film a video like talking about the chapstick. because I guess all I could do was talk about the chapstick and how much I loved it.
It is really good.
Oh, it's amazing. Like it's very, when it first came out, people thought, oh, why not just get the normal mint flavor? But
Oh.
they just taste so good, and it's the same stuff. But you might as well have something that tastes good. And so we filmed a video down by the river of me just kind of talking about chapstick, and it was just one take, and I just kind of said everything that was on the mind, and the rest is history, I guess.
Well, and then so if people were there, this got played at, was it at Appreciation or at Big Campfire that we played the videos?
They played it at Appreciation, and I think it was more of an inside joke with the JCs and like Dazzler and Cappy that pretty much everyone else was just like, and we were all just dying.
I'll never forget. I was so confused. Like the first one played, I was like, okay, that's pretty funny, and then the next flavor came up. I was like, hang on, there's more.
It just kept,
and JCs were just falling out. Like you couldn't stop laughing. I was like, this is a joke I don't get, but it's working. So what are you gonna do?
Yep, exactly. And so that's kind of where it all started. And then last year we did it again.
Yes.
And I think, well, there really weren't many people who had seen the one that I did as a JC. So it was just, nobody had an idea what was going on again. And I was laughing the whole time. And a lot of people,
yeah,
there's mixed reviews.
I really enjoy it when like Tank and I get to do something that we think is really funny, and everybody else is like, "What are they doing?" I was like, "No, this is funny."
That's exactly how it was.
Yeah. So you've been coming to camp for a fairly long time. You've been in a lot of roles now. What's your favorite part about camp?
I think my favorite part about camp is definitely just all the friends that you make. And, it going from being a counselor to a junior counselor to being actually a real counselor last summer, the dynamic was pretty much the same, like regardless of the position I was in. And obviously, as a camper, I only went for 2 weeks every year that I was.
Sure.
And so, even in those 2 weeks, you just become such great friends with all the kids in your cabin and with your counselors. And it's that kind of type of bond that happens that is so special about camp. And then when I was a JC, it was for a month, and that whole bond was just, multiplied by 10, and it just became something so much more, and something that was definitely a lot different than being there for only 2 weeks. And it definitely made it a lot cooler of an experience, being so close with people like that for so long. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So put it all together. What's your favorite memory from camp ever?
Oh man, that is tough.
We ask hard-hitting questions on the podcast.
Yeah, this is a tough one here. Guys, 7 years. There's a lot of stuff that went on. I think one of the coolest things that ever happened was getting my counselor name tag as a JC.
Oh, okay.
Because it was kind of, we had the 2 weeks of all the training and everything, and it had been something that I'd always wanted to do as a camper, was to be, a real counselor.
Yeah.
And when I got that name tag, it was pretty surreal, I guess.
Yeah.
Just finally having it in print on there, and finally just kind of being a part of that upper echelon of the counselors,
When I think the timing of that, because if people haven't been to camp, they haven't seen it. That happens on Friday night, and on Saturday morning, you're off to be basically a junior counselor. Like you're in a cabin and you've got a polo shirt, and there's this monumentous shift between Friday night and Saturday morning. I think the name tag really symbolizes that.
Yeah.
All right, so you've lived all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
You're at college now. What lessons from camp or things from camp do you kind of take with you and use on a regular basis?
So kind of just going back to the whole making friends and everything, I think one of the biggest things was kind of just putting yourself out there. And it sounds cliche, but just being yourself. And if you're just being yourself, there will be people who love you for who you are, and you become friends that way. And so I think just kind of coming into college like that, and especially like moving to Singapore for the first time, because I had never been to a different school my entire life. I'd
Sure.
gone to school with the same people for 13 years, and what camp taught me was that you kind of just have to put yourself out there, and even if you're a little scared of what might happen, at the end of the day, you are who you are, and if you find friends who are like you, there's nothing better than that. So definitely just knowing to put yourself out there and not hold back with anything, and try to meet as many people as you can and talk to as many people as you can. And
yeah, and I think that's. I mean, I'm really happy that our theme this year is all about friendship and making friends, because I think it's a social skill that really can be learned, and you have to be super intentional about it. And then it's like you said, you can do anything. Like going to college, I would guess, at least socially, doesn't seem like such a big challenge, because you know that you can meet people and figure out how it all works, and that's a huge step up, I think. Because so often you hear about people and you say, well, why didn't college work out? And they're like, oh, so far from home, I didn't know anybody. And it's like, well, that's a problem you can solve pretty easily.
Yeah.
Meet some people, and then you know them.
It was funny coming here, because obviously no one from my high school in Toronto was going to come to University of Georgia. But all the kids I was meeting were all from these Atlanta suburbs and everything. And they would come to UGA with sometimes 80 kids from their graduating class, so they knew a lot of people, and they had friends coming in, they were all roommates with their friends from high school and everything. And my roommate's from Pennsylvania. He knew no one coming here either. So it was really different to kind of experience how there were so many people that knew a lot of people, but there also was people like myself and my roommate and a couple of my other friends who came in here, blind, and had to put yourself out there and meet all these new friends. And it's definitely cool to see all that.
No, I always, it was one of my favorite parts when I went to college, was meeting people who I had nothing in common with.
Yeah.
Other than however I met them, like they didn't look like me. They came from a different place. Their families were so different, and like all of a sudden the whole world was kind of there in that college town.
Yeah.
I'd sometimes feel bad for people who don't get that experience, who, like all those guys from the suburbs of Atlanta who went with all the people they know. Like you already knew those guys.
Yeah.
You missed out on something there, I think.
And like you were saying, you become friends with people that you have nothing in common with. Like I got friends who are from, deep South Georgia,
right?
Who, they're very Southern people who I'm obviously, I'm a California kid, I guess. And it's very different world, but we're great friends.
Right. What advice do you have for first-time campers? People who are coming for the first time, maybe they're scared, they're anxious, they've never been away before. You've been through that. What advice do you have?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest advice is that you're not the only one. Because every year there's new campers in every age group, boys and girls that are coming to camp for the first time. 21, and I was really lucky that my sister went to camp the year before I did.
Sure.
So then the first year that I went, she was there, and she would come check in on me and everything. But definitely, it's just that having the mindset that obviously you're going to be afraid, and you're going to be scared of kind of being away from home for 2 weeks without your phone and without any real like constant contact with mom and dad and all your friends at home. That you're not the only one, and it's okay to be scared. But at the same time, like I've said before, you just got to put yourself out there and just have fun and make the most of the situation. Because if you end up staying scared for too long, then you'll kind of regret that towards the end.
I think I talked, Lyric.
Yes, yeah.
I was talking to him earlier this year, and he said the exact same thing. I asked him, what would you say to kind of people who are coming for the first time? He's like, listen, some of this stuff is scary, and it's going to be scary, and it's not going to get less scary. So do it right away and figure out if you like it or not. Because if you wait 3 years to get on the zip line, and then you figure out you love it, then you're kicking yourself, and you're like, I wasted 3 years.
And I've seen that a lot too. Kids that were in cabins with me, and last year as a counselor, seeing, kids that are so afraid to do the high ropes course.
Yeah.
And they finally get across the first level, and they're the first one to say, "All right, I'm going to go first on the second level."
Right.
It's so yeah, it's pretty cool seeing them.
I talked to somebody who's a rocks and ropes counselor, and their biggest fear until they did it was the high ropes course. I was terrified of it, and I didn't. I figured I loved it. It was, society had kind of told me I should be scared of this tall thing, and I got up there and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I was on the high ropes a lot last summer, and I was a little scared of it as a counselor, or as a camper, but I was taking pictures up there a lot, and I just loved staying up in the trees. It's great.
I get up there kind of once a year, and it still frightens me a little, but it's that good kind of frightened where you're like, you feel more alive when you come down.
Yeah, it gets the adrenaline going, and you step on the wire, and it starts swaying, and
Okay. All right, Uncle, it's time for the speed round. 5 questions we ask everybody who comes on the podcast.
Okay.
Uncle, what's your favorite Repeat After Me song?
The Moose song.
Good choice. What's your favorite item on the salad bar?
The carrot strips.
Oh, okay. What's your favorite lip balm flavor?
I stick with chipmunk. See, that's the toughest question for me. I'm the chapstick guy. Chipmunk cherry, the first year.
Oh, it's an absolute classic. Around the campfire, marshmallows or popcorn?
Popcorn.
And finally, Uncle, what's your real name? Oh, I'm so sorry. We're all out of time. We'll have to get your real name the next time you're on the podcast. Uncle, thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Soy.
Joke of the cast, joke of the cast. 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 Joke of the cast. Do you guys know why the cowboy bought a little wiener dog? Because he wanted to get along, little doggy. And now, it's time for another Gaxpiration with Sunshine. Today's Gaxpiration comes from the great Nelson Mandela, who told us, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Well, that brings us to the close of this, the 26th episode of the Gold Arrow Camp podcast. I'm just starting to get excited for camp. It's right around the corner. Hey, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope we made your day a little bit brighter today. If you could, rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. That helps other people who might not know about the podcast find the podcast. I want to thank bensounds.net. They provided the music that we use for intros and outros. I want to thank Uncle for being such a gracious interview subject. Well, that's all the thank yous and all the time I have. I'm Soy, and I'll save a marshmallow for you.